Okay. All right. Well, I want to say thank you guys for coming here. You guys have probably had a blast already. This is the last talk of this tent, which is just blows me away that you all stuck through this heat to hopefully be inspired to go back home and take everything that you've learned to then, implement anything that resonates with you. If you guys don't know who I am, my name is Kaylee. My YouTube channel is the Honeystead. A little backstory about me. I am a feral child at heart. Grew up in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Linden, Virginia. I was foraging as a child, finding ginseng, shaking the pawpaw trees to harvest the fruit, coming back home with stained blackberries from head to toe because that's the childhood that I was blessed with. And I do encourage you, if you have little ones, to let them be feral because it's a good life. I do try to value everything that we have been taught through generations of ways that, that was just the way of living. And I want to honor that, and I want to continue that. And that's part of planting seeds and spreading roots and, hopefully teaching the little guys, because without you guys being here, learning some of the ways of life, and if you don't teach your little ones, it's going to be forgotten. So I do hope that you take all of that, everything that you learned this entire weekend, and remember that we have little ones that are watching. So my littles are not little anymore. My littles are now taller than me. But I hope to have more littles, not from me personally, but, I say the honeybees brought me back to my roots. I'm a beekeeper, I'm an herbalist, and, I don't fit into a box. I do say that. I just live life. But when I got older, I became a wife. My husband was in the Army. We were stationed in Fort Riley, Kansas. He did 2 deployments in Iraq, and then when he got home, we both agreed that we wanted to raise our kids back in our home, so we went back home and we started a farm when we wanted to teach them to be as sustainable as possible and pass down knowledge. And I kind of got away a little bit, got into Western medicine, worked as a CNA, did everything from hospice to nursing homes, and ended up as a surgical first assistant in the operating room where I did trauma and you name it, I've pretty much done it. But the honeybees brought me back. Becoming a beekeeper, I realized the importance of the herbs and wanted to make sure that I continued to grow for my bees and then utilize the herbs for my health, utilize the herbs for their health. And so I do say the bees brought me back to my roots. I walked away from Western medicine right before COVID without knowing that it was going to be a thing. I went down to PRN and kind of never went back. And so I just one step at a time. This is where I believe God's leading me to be, and so I'm here. I don't know what tomorrow looks like, but I'm here. So that being said, I still wanted to help people. I wanted to still make sure that I was teaching and nurturing people because that is my heart. And so I went back to school to become an herbalist, got the fancy pieces of paper. I'm a clinical herbalist. I consider myself a community herbalist. I help the people that are around me. And then I started documenting and sharing on YouTube because I realized that there were more people I could help. And again, I'm just here. My goal as an herbalist is not necessarily to tell you what's going to help you. My goal as an herbalist is to help you not be dependent on me. I want you to be able to learn how to help yourself. Because unfortunately, we do live in a society where we have become very dependent. And I know that herbal medicine can be super scary, but it doesn't have to be. And you just, one herb at a time. So Yes, the honeybees brought me back. Now, for you guys, these are the questions that you have to ask yourself. What brought you here? I have asked many people, and they all have a different answer. Some say they want to go to herbal medicine because they're tired. They're tired of going to the doctors, which again, coming from Western medicine, I do believe that there is a world that can be combined, and I appreciate everything that I have learned. And you can use both worlds together. I want you to think of the herbs as preventative. I want you to think of the herbs as, how do you get to the core root of your problem? If it's chronic, I want you to look to the herbs as if you are nourishing yourself. I use herbs for chronic, I use herbs for acute, and I use herbs for nourishment. And each herb has something different that it offers. So these are the questions that you ask yourself. When my herbalist asked me what brought me here, I didn't have an answer. I didn't know. And I think it's okay to not have an answer. I think sometimes you just have to let it evolve. And at some point, it's going to click. I'm still learning. I will forever learn. So you don't have to have your answer right away. And the other aspect of it is breaking a cycle. And breaking is beautiful. I love when I walk down the road and I see dandelions growing out of broken concrete. To me, that concrete had to break for that dandelion to grow. And sometimes we have to break and say, no, I'm going to break this cycle. I'm going to change. And it's you allowing yourself to break to be able to grow. So look for the dandelions. Now, the practice of herbal medicine that I focus on is more holistic. It's a holistic herbalism. I don't want you to think that, yes, herbs can be a great solution for an acute situation. So an acute situation, you've got a stomach ailment, you've got a stuffy nose, you've got a sore throat. But unfortunately, many of us have looked to herbs like a Band-Aid, which is very similar to Western medicine. The Western medicine approach is a quick fix. So the holistic approach really takes your whole life into consideration, everything that makes you as unique as you are. Your lifestyle, the food that you're eating, your emotional health, your spiritual health. We look at all of it. Are you physically active? Are you doing anything that's pouring into you? That, I think, is the one thing that people forget, is to pour into themselves. And you can't take care of somebody else unless your cup is full. So I do think that the holistic approach is a wonderful way, because it's not just the herb. We're looking at food. We're looking at lifestyle. We're looking at everything to help you become a better you. So it's all about balance, and it's all about harmony. So I hope that you explore more into the holistic approach, being mindful, going outside, taking walks, getting fresh air. But I think the one thing that we forget the most is gratitude. Sometimes we wake up, and when I was a little girl, my mom and dad used to tell me that it was up to me to decide on what type of day I wanted to have. I could have a good day, or I could have a bad day. And so I'm very blessed to have had that. And later, I've learned, which, if any of you read the Bible, obviously, there's a lot of talk about words being power. We have the ability to speak life, and we have the ability to speak death, and we speak it over ourselves. So we tell ourselves how we want, how we want to feel, how we want to be. And then also, again, your littles are watching. So what you're doing to yourself, they're going to follow. And again, it's about breaking. Breaking is okay. Now, what is a home apothecary? I'm sorry, husbands that are in the room. If your wives have seen my apothecary, you are probably going to want an apothecary. And long story short, just the 20 by 12 shed that you can turn into a she shed, it's great. But not everybody needs that apothecary size. I just chose to convert and create a space that I can invite people in and let them start learning how to heal. Let them start learning about helping themselves. But those old china cabinets that you can get for like $5 at a flea market or thrift store, you can take and create a little apothecary space. I mean, who uses china these days? So, although I do like, fancy teacups. But you can take an old china hutch and you can completely turn it into your home apothecary, especially one that has a space underneath of it that you can store your tinctures as you make them. And plus, not only that, if you're looking at the herbs, you're going to use the herbs. My hutch, this is my home apothecary. It's in my kitchen. I look at it, I use it, I go to it often, I stock it often. I am there. If you put it in an area where you're never at, you're not going to use it. Not only that, though, I found that whenever I have people that come over, especially the ones that haven't quite learned or haven't quite allowed themselves to see plants as medicine, it's a conversation. It allows you to say, hey, this plant does this, or this one does that. And then what ends up happening is a lot of the times they get super excited and then they start wanting to do herbal medicine with you. And guess what? You have just now created a little community for yourself, which is very important when it comes to herbal medicine. But essentially, your home apothecary is a space that you're going to keep all of your herbs. It's your place that your tinctures are, your spices, anything that you use. But don't forget your spice cabinet. A lot of people really forget about their spice cabinet. But if you are wanting to get into herbal medicine and you don't know where to start, I do say start there. Pull up your little jars, and I'm not going to lie, some of us probably have some little containers of herbs that are probably 10, 15 years old, still in that same container. It might be time to go ahead and get rid of it and start fresh. But I believe that your spice cabinet is really a good place to start because there is such a variety and there are so many herbs that you can use. For instance, thyme. So thyme is antimicrobial, antifungal. It supports your respiratory system. How many of us, when we're sick, or think about when you were a little girl or a little boy and you had this respiratory cough and your mom made a pot of soup and then added all the herbs into it. That is using plant medicine. You are using the herbs, you're cooking with the herbs, you're eating the herbs, you're still getting all of the goodness that each herb has to offer, and you're eating food that is healthy and cooked for you. So your thyme, your oregano, your ginger, garlic. Garlic is one of my absolute favorites. I eat a clove of garlic. I have it fermented in my honey. Anytime I'm not feeling good, that is delicious. And has anybody had honey fermented? Okay. See all the hands that's up? Anybody who hasn't, I recommend you to make your own. It's delicious. I take some of the honey and I even put it on bread. Eat the garlic, it's lovely. But garlic, supports your cardiovascular system. Then you have rosemary. I cook with rosemary quite often, but I also use rosemary as an oil for my hair to help grow my hair. I make it, sometimes I add it into tea. Not that delicious, I will tell you. I'm like, this is not the greatest, but I know that the rosemary is really good for boosting my memory, which I probably should have had before I came here. Cayenne pepper. Cayenne is an interesting one. Everyone thinks like, oh, it's just hot. But I use cayenne pepper a few different ways. One of the ways that I use it is I actually will mix it into a salve, and I will put it on my temples if I have really bad tension migraines. You can also put it on your joints. it acts like icy hot. Okay, it's like the same heating up, but really what it's doing is it's tricking your nerves to make you not think about the pain that you're actually having. So you can use cayenne in salves, cook with it. I'll tell you a story. My herbal school teacher told me, I have not experienced this personally, but I do have this with me all the time on my emergency first aid kit in my herbal pack, but I keep cayenne tinctured. She had a client that came to her house. He started showing signs of having a heart attack. She took the tincture, put it in his mouth. She truly believes that it allowed him to stay alive long enough until paramedics came. So cayenne will increase the amount of cardiac contractions and help with the blood flow to get to all of the peripheral spots, all of your hands and your feet, and just really help boost your blood or the contractions of your heart. Now, the other thing about cayenne that I love, who here has cold hands, cold feet? A lot. Okay? Maybe you need to look to have adding that heat into your life to allow for that blood flow to actually get there. So I'll add cayenne into my honey. Love cayenne. If you haven't noticed, I'm a beekeeper too, so I do encourage, honey with a lot of the things. But cayenne and honey is delicious. And then turmeric. I know a lot of people probably know about turmeric as an anti-inflammatory. I make it as a tincture, but I'll be honest with you, every time I take it, my teeth are orange. So I make it into gummies instead. I also cook with turmeric all the time. So looking at your spice cabinet is a perfect place to start because there are so many ways that you can use the herbs by cooking, by eating, by making it into teas or tinctures or even salves. And then ginger. Ginger is another go-to for me, lovely for upset stomachs. I make these little ginger pastilles. They're honey that I drop a little bit of ginger powder into it, roll it around, make little pill balls, and that's what I take with me. So if I know I have motion sickness, if I know my stomach's upset, I'll just pop one in my mouth. Honey is wonderful for your gut, and then add the herbal ginger into it. You've just created something that is going to help settle everything, and it's not going to the store, and it's not buying a medicine that, which again, if that's what you want to do, that's fine, but this is about being sustainable. This is about doing the things for yourself. So everybody is going to end up getting bees and growing a big herbal garden. Now, the herbal garden, I call it my living apothecary. It's everywhere. It's not just in a garden, and it doesn't have to grow in rows. You could walk outside, and you can look to the herbs, and once you start learning about even the simplest weed that you one day hated, you one day cussed, that it was growing in a place that you didn't want your plant to grow, you are never going to look at another plant the same way. But having a place, knowing that your herbs or weeds are growing, that you can always go to, and letting them just reseed. I love my apothecary, but during these months, my apothecary is living. Some of the things that I grow, chamomile, love chamomile, sweet like honey. It is probably one of my favorite herbs that I will mix into my tea blends, especially if I have another herb called, anybody experience valerian root? Valerian root smells like feet. I have now been told by my husband that I'm not allowed to brew up valerian root tea in the house because every time I do, he's like, what is that smell? He's walking through, looking at the trash, Anyway, so I've learned that I actually prefer valerian root as a tincture. It tastes better. Use it for antispasmatics, if I need to go to sleep, if I have just that tension neck pain, valerian root is lovely. But back to chamomile, because I know this is what's going to end up happening. We're going to talk about all the other plants that are not on this form. But chamomile is lovely, great for anxiety, for stress, tastes delicious. You can use it in multiple different ways. You can tincture it. I don't exactly like tincturing it. I actually prefer to use it in teas, but I will also infuse it in honey, especially if I have little ones. When my little ones were little, if they needed to have something and they really weren't big fans of teas, just adding a little bit of honey with the herb into it, infused, that really helped settle. Catnip, not just for cats. I'll tell you a story about catnip, and forgive me if you've already heard me talk about this, but a couple of months ago, my daughter and I went to a conference. She's with me all the time whenever I go to speaking events, and we went to dinner, ate at a restaurant, and within a couple of hours, she was so sick. And this was the night before we actually had to go to the conference, and I had to speak, and she was so sad because she was like, "Mommy, I'm sorry, like I'm sick." Luckily, I brought my mobile apothecary with me because that's what you're gonna end up, doing when you travel, is bringing your herbs with you. And so I brewed up a very potent cup of tea that was strictly catnip and honey. Again, the beekeeper, the honey in me, I'll tell you, it's amazing. She took her cup, drank her cup of tea. Probably within about 15, 20 minutes, she was no longer getting sick. Her stomach cramps had settled. She went to sleep, woke up the next morning, totally fine. I am so thankful that we had catnip, because without the catnip, I would have ended up taking her to the urgent care. That would have been a whole nother story. We wouldn't have had sleep, and that was something I could offer to her. So there is definitely a level of empowerment by knowing that you have something that you can help when you have somebody that really needs it. But catnip, I say, is for the whiny, cranky baby. And that is not always with children. That is 100% with adults too. Now, it is definitely, it has an odor to it. My bees absolutely love it. Side story, bees use herbal medicine as well. That's how we get honey. That's how we get propolis. That's, all the good stuff. Anyways, I'm doing a study right now using the catnip, placing it in and around the hives that I have to help with have the volatile oils help with the varroamite. So hopefully in a couple of years, I'll have a study out for you guys. The next one that I think is lovely and I think everyone should grow is comfrey. Now, I primarily use comfrey externally. Back in the olden days, back in the past, they did use it internally. However, it's not as nice to your liver, so you got to be mindful of that, and definitely look to comfrey mainly externally. I'll tell you a story. So in the operating room, I did ortho trauma, and I had a patient on the table. We were repairing a broken wrist. The surgeon laughed and joked, saying that the patient, had been using comfrey salve and was like, well, they're still here. They're still in the operating room. I bit my tongue because I knew I've had experience with herbs. When we opened up her arm to go ahead and repair, we did have to use, plates and screws. But when we did the surgery, the timing of her healing, actually seeing it in person and actually seeing the growth, was quicker than letting it just, how do I say it? You could see her bones healing quicker than I had seen other people who hadn't used comfrey. That speaks volumes, because comfrey is used to help mend bones. Seeing it in person, I have goosebumps, because it's one of those things. It's like once you see it, then you start really realizing, like, wow, these herbs actually have the chemicals, the phytochemicals to do what they're doing. And this isn't just folk. We're seeing it, and it's proven, and there's scientific studies. Also great for arthritis. Anyone who has knee pain, comfrey, made into a salve. Add a little cayenne to it. Wonderful for your knees. Now, feverfew is one that I speak quite often about. I suffered from migraines pretty bad. It took me many years to figure out what was my trigger. And that's another part to it. Do your study, figure out what triggers, what causes the symptoms. So for me, I found that it was weather change. So anytime we would have that drop in barometer, a storm system would come through, always. Didn't matter whatever I did. So I started using feverfew as a preventative. When I knew that there was a storm coming through, I would make it into a tincture, and I would, take it up to 3 times a day. I'd also take a little bit of the leaf and just eat it straight from the plant. Every single time I did that, my migraine never took off any longer. It stopped, or the tension stopped. It tastes like aspirin. It's very bitter. But if you grow feverfew, a leaf a day will keep a migraine away. It's also a vasodilator. So for me, that's what I needed. I had that constricting migraine, and I needed my blood vessels to open up, and that was my herb of go-to. I don't know how to. Okay, there it is. The next one is oats. I talk a lot about oats. This is food. Oats, oatmeal. But when you grow your oats, you throw it just like you would with grass seed. Throw it right down, and you're going to grow these beautiful oat tops. I use oats 3 different ways. I use the oat straw in a lot of my teas. I use the dried oat tops. We eat them, but then I also harvest them when they're premature. And they have this really awesome milky substance that is so wonderful for your nervous system. There are some studies about milky stage oats being used for anyone who who has MS. Because of the MS, your myelin sheath is destroyed. This rebuilds the myelin sheath. This nourishes the myelin sheath. So nourishing your nervous system is lovely, and oats are definitely a good one to go to. Passion flower is another one that I grow quite often. It is one of my favorite flowers. It's very viney. It grows pretty much all over the place, but it is wonderful specifically for sleep, insomnia. Definitely calms the anxious, and great with spasms. Now, motherwort is another one. This is a picture of actually motherwort. This is what it looks like. I had to bring motherwort into this one to show you because it is so very good for your cardiovascular system, also great for anxiety. I made up a tincture before I came here, and it had some motherwort and some milky stage oats in it, just because standing in front of a crowd is a little bit challenging sometimes. But, for my mom, my mom and I always say everybody could use a little bit of mother. So great for trauma. Now, outside of growing herbs, my other favorite thing to do is forage. I actually prefer to go foraging than growing because it is one garden I don't have to do anything to. I just walk out. It's the lazy gardener in me. But foraging is definitely one of my favorite things. We do quite a bit. There are so many plants that grow all over, and I'm sure once you guys start looking and seeing what grows in your area, your mind is going to be blown. But broadleaf plantain is definitely my go-to whenever I get stung by my bees, or if my gut is upset, if I need that soothing demulcent, something that's cooling and soothing and anti-inflammatory, I will eat the leaves. You can just pick the leaves right up and you can eat them. I'll also grab the leaves, chew it up, spit it out, put it on my bee sting. It's very classy, but it absolutely works. But plantain can be used both internally and externally. There's a lot of people who I've noticed have come to us with a lot of leaky gut, and plantain is the one that we always say, let's start there. Let's work with the gut first. Then mullein. Has anybody seen mullein? Okay, beautiful, grows tall, soft leaves, can kind of be scratchy. The first year mullein, when it's down low onto the ground, those are the leaves that you want to harvest. The second year mullein, you could, but it's preferred for the first year. But those little yellow flowers, I've used them on my kids for ear infections. Taken the flowers, put it in oil, dropped it in their ear. Guess what? They slept. And it helped. Mullein, when that lovely virus was going around and a lot of people were experiencing a lot of respiratory issues, we not only drank it in our tea because it helped get the gunk out, but it can also be smoked. You can take the leaves, you can dry the leaves, you can roll it up. I mean, you don't have to smoke it. I mean, you could smoke it if you want to, like however smoking device, but you can even just burn it and just breathe the smoke in. My mom got really, really sick, and it all settled right in her chest, and her sensation that she experienced was so cooling. And you would think smoking would burn, but it cooled her lungs. And it allowed her to actually stop coughing, and it was lovely. Burdock root is another one. Do you guys ever have your animals that walk outside and they get these burrs in the wintertime and you have to pick them off? Well, I've learned that my animals have helped me plant my burdock garden, because I have one spot that we would brush our cat, brush our dog, and I would just, toss their hair out. Well, now I have a burdock garden. That is huge. So I'm going to say thanks to the animals. But burdock, big leaves, wonderful leaves, but the root itself is delicious. Not only is it medicinal, it's delicious. And if you go to like an Asian or an Oriental market, you can find the root so long. It's called gobo. So if you ever want to just cook with it, you can cook with it. But this is food that's just growing. I use burdock to help nourish our digestive system. It's packed full of a substance called inulin, which feeds that good bacteria in your gut, which then helps your body be able to defend itself. Other plants have this, like dandelion, sunchoke. There's quite a bit, but it's a great one to definitely grow, forage for, and learn about. Elderberry and elderflower. I know a lot of people use elderberry syrup to help boost their immune system, but I also use the flower to help break a fever. I will infuse it in honey. You can drink it into a tea, but what it does is it allows your body to sweat. It causes your body to sweat, which is then going to cool your body off. So don't be scared if you're like breaking out into sweat. But I love to infuse ours in honey and then add that honey-infused elderflower into a tea. And yarrow. Yarrow is another beautiful flower that you can forage for. I know a lot of people grow yarrow, but some yarrows are colorful. The ones that we're looking for are the white ones. I do always say to look at the scientific name of the medicinal plant, especially if you're learning to grow or forage, because you don't want to accidentally grow the decorative one. So always look at the scientific name. But yarrow will stop bleeding. So whenever I've gone outside, I'm always, getting cuts and bruises. That's why I'm wearing a long dress. But I always end up cutting myself or bruising or hurting myself, and I'll always grab the yarrow, crush it up, put it right on the spot, and the bleeding will stop. You can also take it internally, take it, externally. There's a funny story about yarrow. My mom took some as a tincture, and all of a sudden, as we were walking, she was going through just so much. Like, it was one of those days where it's like, if everything's going to go bad, it's going to go bad. So we mixed up a tincture. She took it. I'm like, come on, let's go for a walk. We went for a walk. As soon as she, probably like the second loop around our farm, she noticed that her whole body just relaxed. But then she also was sweating. And so sometimes it's that release that you need. And as soon as she did that, she realized, like, for her, that is how yarrow works for her. We also say, well, there's a whole story about yarrow, but it's the warrior herb. So now, beginning to start your home apothecary, I'm going to take a sip really quick, sorry. Yeah, the white flower for yarrow. Only the white flower. Not the pretty orange ones and red ones. So when you're starting your home apothecary, I really want you to just go to your kitchen, because I will tell you, you probably have a lot of the things already there. You've got your jars, you have your bowls, measuring cups, measuring spoons, funnels, sieves. I have some really fancy beakers that I use whenever I'm pouring off little tinctures. It's great for measuring more of like the milliliter size. But starting out, just look and see what you have in your kitchen, because that's really where to start, where to begin. Amber colored bottles are lovely because when you make a tincture, you want to be able to maintain the plant chemicals that are actually, the phytochemicals that are in the actual, that you've extracted from the plant. And the sunlight will break that down. So the amber bottles are not only gorgeous, they will keep your tincture from turning. And then the other thing, labels. I cannot tell you how many times I've made something and be like, oh, I'm going to label that next time. Oh, I'm going to go back to it. Yeah, I've messed up and I've forgotten, walked away from it, and then it's like herbal roulette. You're trying to figure out what you've just made. So I do recommend labels. The ball jar labels, I think, are the best because they are easy to wipe off. You don't have to like scrub them like other labels. So the ball labels are pretty awesome. Now, this is, I think, a really important. I kind of left this empty because I think when it comes down to building your library, it really depends on you. So how I built my library, I went to thrift stores, I went to Goodwills, I went to yard sales. I had, shopped and looked and picked up books. Some of them I ended up getting because I thought it would be fun. Flipped through it, used it for a month, passed it on, gave it to somebody else. There are so many herbal books out there. You could go more on a foraging style, which is what I like to do. Foraging style books are more my speed because I love to go out and find the actual plants. One of my favorite is the Peterson Field Guide of Medicinal Plants. I really enjoy that book because it talks about how the Indians used to use these plants. You can also find foraging books, herbal books based off of your location. I do recommend that because my plants are probably going to be completely different than out west. I do have a whole list of herbal books on my website if you're interested in actually seeing and looking through a few of them. I have a huge apothecary library, and that's because I let people come in and open the book, flip through it, and see what resonates with them. And I think that's important because, sampling and looking allows you to kind of see, okay, is this going to fit my need? Are you scientific-based? Do you like scientific-based? Are you interested in going deeper? If you are, one of my favorites is David Hoffman. It's the Medical Herbalism book by David Hoffman. I also very much love the Herbal Encyclopedia from Andrew Chevalier. That one is great because once you're flipping through it, it has pictures. I'm a picture person. I want to see it. So if you're a picture person, that's great. But you can also find books based off of specific topics. I also have a book coming out. It's going to be out next year, so yay, finally. I know. Hardest thing I think I've ever done. So that'll be coming, and I'll just give you a little bit. It's, it incorporates both of my worlds, beekeeping and herbalism, because we can't have the herbs without the bees. Yes, lots of pictures. Yes. Yes. Andrew Chevalier, it's the Herbal Encyclopedia. Any herbal encyclopedia is really good, especially one with pictures. And then David Hoffman, which is the medical herbalism. Yeah, no worries. Now, sourcing herbs is a big one. I think a lot of people are like, where do I get these herbs? You can obviously grow your herbs. I do think growing herbs is great because not only are you building a garden apothecary, you're living apothecary, but you're also already introducing that regenerative aspect to herbal medicine. If you grow the plants and let their seeds drop, guess what? It's going to help grow your garden for the next year. So I 100% say grow the herbs if you absolutely can. If you are growing mint, keep it in a pot because you're going to plant it here and it's going to end up there. I have learned. But there are a few seed companies that I really like. Strictly Medicinal is one that has a lot of good seeds. I know Survival Seeds came out with an actual herbal pack. They let me kind of review it and try it out, and so far all of my plants are growing really well. And then also Haas Tools even has it. Baker Creek even has medicinal seeds. Just make sure, again, that you're always looking at that scientific name versus the common name, because that's going to determine whether or not you're actually growing something that's medicinal. Purchasing herbs. I'm a big fan of actually purchasing herbs that already are ready to go. And I think the reason why is because if you're going to take the time to grow something, I think it'd be good to at least sample it and try it out. So what I like to do is either buy in bulk, split it up between a bunch of my friends. Everybody gets a portion of it. We all go in together, we share, because sometimes you can only get in certain herbs as a pound, and you might not need a pound. You might need a quarter of a pound or a couple of ounces. So going in with somebody, I think, is really good, because not only are you sampling, it's saving money, but you can also, try it before you actually really get into growing. But Frontier Co-op is a good one. So is Star West Botanicals, Mountain Rose. There's also another one, Pacific Botanicals. But I also do recommend you look to see who is around you. You might have an herb farm within minutes that they're already growing all of these medicinal herbs. And if you don't, and you really are into herbal medicine, maybe this is a farm idea that you might want to do. Start sourcing or start having for your community. And then, of course, foraging. Again, that is one of my favorite ways to get the herbs. It's free. I just walk out there and get it. But as tempting as it is sometimes when you're driving down the road and you see this beautiful plant that's growing and you're like, oh my gosh, I know what it is. Don't get it from the side of the road. Unless it's like really kind of off of that off-beaten path. Because then, of course, the plants are getting all of the vehicle exhaust. You don't want that. And then also dog parks. Not exactly a good place to get your herbs. But I have absolutely seen people who will post on Facebook and they'll say, hey, on the community post, they'll say, hey, does anybody have this plant growing? Can I come and harvest it? I love that. I absolutely love when I see people communicate and they reach out and they're like, yeah, I have all of this. It's growing. That being said, make sure they're not spraying. Make sure they're not using any chemicals. But there are so many ways to actually get herbs for your home apothecary that's absolutely free. And free is the best way. Now, ways to use the herbs. I think this is an interesting one, because once you start looking at one herb, I think this is where it kind of can get very complicated. Can you use this as a tea? Can you use this as a tincture? Can you use it as a salve? Most of the times, yes. That does take you doing a deeper dive into each individual plant. Looking up the plant, it's called a materia medica. That kind of gives you that full description of the plant, how to use it, what to use. But certain ways, obviously, infusing, making into a tea, I really only do that to herbs that I think taste delicious, because if it doesn't taste good, I'm not going to drink it. If it's a plant that doesn't taste good, I'm going to just make it as a tincture. That's probably my go-to way of taking herbs is teas and infusing them also with honey. A decoction is a stronger tea, so your same mindset, water, plant, slowly reducing it down. But think of your decoction like your soup. That's a concentrated tea. That's more for like roots, barks, berries, the harder bits. Tinctures are another way. A lot of people ask about tinctures. It's an herbal extract, but you don't always have to use alcohol. You could use apple cider vinegar if you want to avoid alcohol. The shelf life is a little bit shorter on apple cider vinegar. I don't mind using apple cider vinegar, but I like to add honey, turn it into an oxymel. I think it tastes a lot better. I end up making something like a salad dressing with herbs, apple cider vinegar, my honey, and I'll eat it that way. But tinctures are a concentrated way of taking in the herbs. The other thing that I like about the tinctures, once you've prepared it, it's ready to go. You can put it in your pocket. Unlike having tea where you have to brew it, takes a little bit longer. But it is a simple way, and yes, you can use multiple different menstruums to be able to extract the herb. Herb-infused oil can be rosemary and some olive oil. You're going to eat it. You're going to use it. You're going to cook with it. But you can also use certain herbs in your olive oil, and you can turn it into a salve. That's how you pull that out. You've created a medium that's going to pull all those chemical constituents from the plant and harness it. And then, of course, my salves. But there are more. Salves you can make with beeswax, with your oil. Add all of your spices, whatever you want to add into it, like your cayenne. You can do your activated charcoal if you want to make a drawing salve. Other ways that I actually use more herbs are obviously infused in honey. I make something, it's called an electuary. So it's a powdered herb mixed with my honey. I make a spread. Or make the pastille, which is like the little pill. You can have a capsule maker. The sky is your limit. This is more for what resonates with you. How would you take this herb? So it doesn't always have to be a tincture, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is you can play around with the different things. And if it tastes good, you're going to do it. And some tinctures don't taste good. And that's okay. You just take it down no matter what. And then take a spoonful of honey. But I always tell people to start with 5 herbs. What does that look like? To me, that's go outside. Go out your front door. Explore the 5 herbs that are around you. If you don't have that, that's okay. Walk down the tea aisle at your grocery store. Pull the box of tea that's there and look at it and say, oh, this has this in it. This has this in it. Take a picture of it. Trust me, that is a simple, sure way to be able to challenge yourself to say, I want to really understand these 5 herbs. What does this look like? So you're going to understand the herbal action. So what that is what is this herb doing in you? Is it an anti-inflammatory? Is it an analgesic, which is for pain? Is it a carminative? Is settling your stomach? I know that sometimes looking at the bigger words can be intimidating, but once you understand the definition, then you can start kind of picking and choosing and understanding how to properly facilitate the herbs through your for your health, for your family. But definitely understanding the herbal actions is key, because you don't necessarily want to have a stimulant like green tea before you go to bed. So coffee, think about that. The ways that you can use them. Can you make it into a salve? Can you make it into a tincture? Can you make it into a tea? Going down to, can you grow it? Can you forage it? And when to harvest. That, I think, is really key. I think a lot of people get stuck on when to harvest the plant. For the first year, if I discover a new plant, I actually won't harvest it the first year. I want to watch the whole cycle, watch how it grows, understand it. And then the second year, if I'm a little comfortable with it, I already know, especially with foraging, that's when I start really deep diving into actually harvesting it, using it. But certain times a year, you don't want to harvest the root, kind of like gardening, vegetables. The plant's energy in the spring is going from the roots all the way up. If you're harvesting the leaves, spring, summer, that's when you would harvest the leaves. If you're going to try to harvest a plant just for its root, it's in reverse. All that plant energy going back down into the root, that's when you focus on the root. That's when the most concentrated constituents are in the plant. So that's another thing. And again, yes, what parts of the plants can you use? The scary factor into herbal medicine are the contraindications. This is where I think a lot of people really stop with their walk in herbal medicine because they are afraid. And they're afraid because they don't quite understand. But I do think that it's very important to understand the contraindications. So what is that is, can it affect the medicine that I'm on? Can it affect me if I'm allergic to this plant? So this is unique based off of you as an individual, and this is where you have to do the research to make sure that this plant is right for you. Valerian root is a good example. So has anybody taken Benadryl and it does the opposite effect? Okay. Valerian root would do that. Just like medicine, sometimes it has that opposite. It does take you experiencing the herbs to be able to understand if they're going to work with you. So when I start to mess around, using the herbs, making them into a tea, making into a tincture, I will take it and then I'll keep an actual running notebook for myself. It's for myself, what works for me. Lavender does not work for me. I am not a fan. I know it's amazing. I know it smells good, but if I go to use it in like a tea, immediate migraine. So that's something just to keep your note. But having a journal for yourself, I think, is really important. Not only for you, but also for your family members who might be trying the herb for the first time too. And that's something that you can always reference back to. The other big thing is not to do this alone. I know I'm up here alone, but I don't do this alone. I have my family with me. I think that there's more healing sometimes that go into doing this with somebody than doing it at all. So if you have a daughter, if you have a son, if you have a mother, if you have a grandmother, if you have a child, this is where you start. Do it with them. You're showing yourself the vulnerable, especially if you're a mother, and you're learning this, and you have a daughter that's looking up to you. You're showing them that you don't know everything, but it's okay. I think sometimes that we forget that, deep down, like, I'm still a girl. Like, I might be a mom, I might be an adult, but I'm still a girl. And so there is healing that happens there on that relatability, on doing this together. I have she'll be 83. I take my grandma with me all the time. We go off-roading. She is a hoot going off-roading. It's different now because when I forage with her, anyways, yeah. So make your memories. But hold on, just one more thing. I think this is the one thing that really resonated with me because I think that a lot of people are really intimidated to say this. I think when I became an herbalist, I was like, well, when do I call myself an herbalist? Who's cooking with spices? Who's growing herbs? I'm sorry. This is the Webster Dictionary, the definition of an herbalist. If you are already doing this, you are an herbalist. It doesn't have to be intimidating. And I was an herbalist when I was just growing herbs. So I missed a slide, so I'm just going to go this back. Start planting your seeds. Start sharing. I don't care how much you don't know. I don't care if you just know one plant and one little fact about that plant. If you don't share it, then you're not passing anything on. It can be the simplest, dumbest fact ever, but it's something that you've learned. And that's the only way to keep this going. So start planting seeds and remain humble. Always be a student, because we are forever going to learn. That is our only way of remaining humble, is by being teachable. So, okay, I'm done.